But first, our top story. A lot of people wondering just why is it that Pakistan did what it did with that terrorist attack in Pahalgam. It has a great deal to do with the Pakistani army chief, and that's what we are going to focus on. Let's try and understand General Asim Munir, what he actually is all about. Well, Munir is implicated in orchestrating terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir, escalating regional tensions. It's not just now. As Director General ISI in 2019, Munir planned the Pulwama attack, killing 44 Indian security personnel. This year, Munir's leadership saw the Pahalgam attack by the Resistance Force, a terrorist group in which 26 tourists were killed. Now, let's put this in context. Since 2023, terrorist activities have surged in Jammu's Rajouri, Poonch and Riyasi areas, targeting civilians and soldiers. The Pakistan Army uses narco-terrorism, smuggling of drugs, to fund terror operations in Kashmir. Drug trafficking across the line of control fuels terrorism and addiction among Kashmiri youth. That's just one aspect of this. The ISI has also been exploiting the Kartarpur Sahib to radicalize Sikh pilgrims, risking regional stability. Munir's tenure extension, that's going to happen now, risks military overreach, corruption, and reduced accountability. Corruption is important because there have been several allegations of Munir's nepotism and corruption, like promoting relatives, which undermine Pakistan's governance. So that's what this man is all about. And as a former Director General of the ISI, which is the nodal agency which has been pushing terrorism into India, it is a matter of huge concern. Joining us now, Vivek Kaju, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Very few Indian diplomats know Pakistan and Afghanistan, that region, better than him. Could you tell us a little bit about the Pakistani army chief? Is he a besieged soldier at this stage, given the infighting that he faces within the army, the fact that Pakistan's economy is in a mess, the fact that Imran Khan still has considerable support? Why has he done or allowed something like this to take place?
Look, I do agree that Munir faced issues, but it's my belief that he has the army under his control, especially after the events of May 9th, 2 years ago, when Imran Khan's people took to the streets. He purged the army of elements who were against him, who were with Imran Khan. Yes, Imran Khan is still a problem because politically he is popular, but I doubt whether Munir will ever allow Imran Khan to come out of prison. He has the judiciary with him in this enterprise. Munir has anti-India reflexes, and these were illustrated when he became, to my mind and in my memory, the first army chief to use the language which Jinnah had used to promote the idea of Pakistan among Indian Muslims during the period leading to the partition. Never after 1947 has such language on Hindus and Muslims been used by any Pakistani leader of note. And certainly, I can't recollect any army chief using this kind of terminology, including Zia, who, as we know, led the Pakistan army into an Islamist mode. So, as far as Pahalgam is concerned, I think in Munir's mind, it is a response to what he believes, and incorrectly, completely incorrectly, but people misbelieve, as he does, that India was responsible through the Baluchis, the Baluch Liberation Army, for the Jafar Express attack. I wrote about this a month ago, that India should expect an event, a terrorist event, launched by Pakistan because of what I was seeing happening in Pakistan in the wake of the Jafar Express attack. Therefore, in my mind, I'm clear that the seeds of the present attack, which doesn't mean he has not been responsible for previous attacks, and as you outlined his activities as DGISI. He has not promoted terrorism, but as far as the specific attack is concerned, I trace its roots on the March 11th, if my memory is correct, on the Jafar Express attack.
Ambassador Kaju, India has been following a fairly systemic path, since the attack took place. It appears that the government may be greenlighting a military operation. Be that as it may, there's been this a series of diplomatic steps as well. India has advised, for example, all countries around the world. We've received a great deal of support. There have been steps which have been taken, Indus waters, etc., etc. Do you believe that at this juncture, whatever diplomatically needed to be done has been done, and that it's now really a military operation in some way, shape, or form going forward?
Look, I think we've taken the right steps diplomatically. We've apprised the international community and the major powers of the Pahalgam attack and who were behind it. But Vishnu, I have to say that we have to understand that the international reaction and response to India's overtures are following a path which is predictable. Pakistan is a state with nuclear weapons. Now, no one wants tensions and an escalatory process to occur between two countries which have nuclear weapons. So the international response has been I won't say a demand, but a request that both countries, and that means India too, should exercise restraint. You would have noticed that President Donald Trump, who in his first two statements was fairly categorical in his support for India, in his third remarks, he said that he is friends with both India and Pakistan. Now that was a shift. He also, of course, said a lot of irrelevant and inaccurate things, but he said that he leaves it to both countries to sort matters out. In my view, that was not to provoke India, because he knows that India will never accept mediation or third-party intervention in anything to do with Pakistan. But I'm fairly certain that the Americans and the major powers, the Europeans too, would at this time be even if form's sake, be advising India to exercise restraint.
Right.
Today, the Prime Minister's words, to use your term, green lighting a certain process, is indicative of how his mind is working and the kind of response he's giving. We must recall that in two previous cases, in 2016 and 2019, when terrorist incidents had taken place, which India thought were unacceptable, India took kinetic action. Certainly, this Pahalgam terrorist attack falls squarely within the definition of an unacceptable terrorist attack.
Right.
So, in the two previous cases, there was kinetic action. And it's very significant when the political leader of the country, and a leader as strong as the Prime Minister is, says that as far as the modalities of action, of operations, that's left to the defense forces.
All right.
And
let's see what finally happens, Ambassador Kaju, going forward. But thank you very much for telling us a little bit about your thoughts on General Asim Munir. Thanks very much indeed. I'm now joined by General S.L. Narasimhan and General K.J.S. Dhillon, two outstanding Indian Army officers, and also Jonah Blank, the American author and journalist. General Dhillon, there's this incredible sense of anticipation in the country that, look, it's going to, a military action is going to take place very, very soon. Is there perhaps the counter argument that it may not necessarily be soon? It'll happen when we are ready, and it'll happen because this government is not looking for optics; they're looking for something substantial. And I would suggest that's why it's taking time. Would you agree?
Yeah, Vishnu, good evening, and good evening to your viewers and to my fellow panelists. Yes, This time, it's not going to be purely a military option as exercised after Uri and Pulwama. This time, it is going to be whole of a nation approach, which would include a military option, diplomatic option, political, economic, and certain options which we don't talk about. And we have already seen, as Mr. Karju was telling, the diplomatic option, some actions are already on the table. And as you said, we are going to take our time to decide our objectives and our options, standalone or in combination. It is going to be time and place of our own choosing. And one thing is very clear, military option is going to be part of this whole combination option which we are going to exercise. And I would like to, as a military man, I would like to bring out a point. Pakistan's war-fighting stamina is much lower than India's war-fighting stamina. And this time, it is not going to be some terrorist as objective, terrorist hideout or terrorist place as objective. This time, we are going to hit at the base of the terrorism, that is the Pakistan military. And we know where the equipments are, where their stores are, where their dumps are, where their expensive equipments are. So it would be best to take out this expensive war-fighting capability in the first go and degrade his war-fighting capability further so that the difference in the war-fighting stamina of India and Pakistan increases further. That would put him behind by decades.
Sure.
Building military capabilities take decades. And that is how it's going to likely to be fanning out this time.
All right.
And
so
we are going to take our time to decide.
Degrade the fighting ability of Pakistan's forces. Jonah Blank, to what extent is America backing India? I mean, I've seen, I feel that the statements made by President Trump were inaccurate when he said that this is we've been fighting for thousands of years. That's not accurate. However, Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, was very clear that the US backs India. Kash Patel said that the FBI will support, or he will support India in this. How important is that support from an intelligence standpoint?
Well, thank you for having me, Vishnu. You're absolutely right that Mr. Trump's comments are historically ill-informed. Nothing new there. The U.S. is supporting India, but this is really not a major point for the U.S. It's barely making any impact in the U.S. press and U.S. decision-making. So I think the U.S. stands ready to assist India for whatever it might be called upon to do, but I don't think the U.S. really is a major player. I think the real point here is one that General Dillon made, that India is now apparently deciding whether the scale of the response. There's very likely going to be a kinetic response, but I think we don't yet know whether that will be a response similar to 2016 and 2019, or perhaps something significantly more vigorous.
Yeah. The images on your screen, which were coming in just a few minutes back, is of the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat exiting the residence of the Prime Minister. That's significant as far as the BJP is concerned. Several people have now been briefed. Is something imminent? I would suggest it is. The timing is unclear. General Narasimhan, I think one concern in this is that if India does choose a military option, for example, airstrikes or naval strikes, or even a surgical strike or a ground incursion, call it what you want, there would be some sort of retaliation by the Pakistani armed forces. We've seen that after 2019. And therefore, there is this potential of a zero-sum game which emerges. If that happens, winning, right, quote-unquote winning, doesn't necessarily come very easily, does it?
Thank you very much, Vishnu. You're right. In any war, I don't think winning or losing is very clear-cut decision that comes out. 71 was an exception, but otherwise, if you look at 65, you look at other wars which we have fought, there is some amount of loss and gain that occurs all the time. That is number one. The number two factor is that, as we panelists have been discussing, the scale, scope, and the place of what we need to do has been left to the armed forces by the Prime Minister just a few minutes ago. So if that is the case, I think we'll have to wait and see as to what kind of actions come out. The aim would be to come back unscathed with the winning as the result of what we are doing. But however, we need to be prepared for any kind of retaliation and reaction from Pakistan, which I am sure the armed forces would do, and ensure that we come back successful in all our endeavors.
All right, General Narasimhan, hold that thought. I just some more of that news coming in. I'll come back to you in a moment. Mohan Bhagwat leaving the residence of the Prime Minister. Let's go across to NDTV's Aishwarya Jain. Aishwarya, in very simple terms, why is this meeting particularly significant at this stage, particularly since it comes just a short while after the message from the Prime Minister's office is that he's greenlit any potential military operation?
Well, it's the government's viewpoint that they want to take each and every organization of the country into consideration. Of course, the political parties have already been briefed about the situation earlier by the government of India by calling all-party meeting, and now RSS chief meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This meeting lasted for almost 1.5 hours, and of course the developments that are taking place in terms of India taking action against Pakistan and the decisions that India had been taken, of course, has been briefed to RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat as well. It was soon after that meeting which concluded, which lasted for 1 hour 30 minutes, in which Prime Minister was briefed by all the three service chiefs. It was stated at that point of time by our sources that Prime Minister had given completely free hand to our Indian armed forces, and they believe in their professionalism as far as targeting the perpetrators of terrorism. So now, after that particular meeting, 1.5 hour meeting with RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat and Prime Minister Narendra Modi concluded. This comes just a day before the all-important CCS meeting that is scheduled tomorrow at 11 a.m. under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Cabinet Committee on Security. So it's tomorrow's meetings will be the latest. There have been a couple of Cabinet Committee on Security meetings which have taken place. The Defence Minister has been holding separate meetings with the Chief of Defence Staff, and tomorrow is another very important one, right? So it just appears that this is a progression of conversations which might end up leading to a military strike, right?
Well, that's right. In fact, there are a series of meetings that went on throughout the day. It was, of course, at the Ministry of Home Affairs. We saw how the DGs of the BSF, the National Security Guard, senior officials from the CISF, CRPF, all have been called, and the report was submitted to the Home Secretary. That was given to the Home Minister, who will be also part in tomorrow's CCS as well. And it was later this crucial meeting at Prime Minister's office. Of course, the decision of what time the action India will take against the perpetrators who are sitting across the border, and in what terms and what mode it will be, it has been all decided. But the communication is something that government wants, and therefore the reason perhaps the government is reaching out to every such organization or the political parties who they wanted to take into consideration. So, looking at that, this meeting with the RSS chief also holds a lot of significance, and tomorrow is a day when we will certainly see that more actions that the Indian government can
so let's
decide
see what finally happens tomorrow, Aishwarya, on those very important meetings. We'll come back to you to track that tomorrow morning as well. Running short on time, I want to go back to General Dhillon. General Dhillon, I think there's a key point over here, and it's sort of linked to the question I was asking General Narasimhan earlier on, is that, in the context of a zero-sum game, in the context of winning and losing, and there's an element of perception in that, the bottom line for India, General Dhillon, you'd agree, is that we would need to understand that there would be losses. When one gets into a conflict, whether it's an airstrike, ground, whatever it is, there will be losses. That happens on both sides. We as a nation need to have the stomach to accept that. That is something which people perhaps don't understand. You call it surgical, very often it's not surgical.
Vishnu, when a situation like this comes, we are losing soldiers every day at the hands of Pak-sponsored terrorism. In any conflict like this, there will be casualties, and we have to understand that. But the most important aspect here is we have the choice of selecting the first target, the timing, and the place. And once we hit, If they retaliate, we will also have the wherewithal to hit back. And the escalation ladder, like I said earlier, the escalation ladder, which is very commonly referred to, is in India's favor because we have a larger war fighting stamina. As the war escalates or war goes into a longer duration, it is in India's favor because then we can decimate the complete war fighting machinery of Pakistan once and for all.
General Narasimhan, one of the key objectives, and this was something that the Prime Minister spoke about, is that we want to hunt down terrorists. And we want to hunt down terrorists wherever they are. Does this point in the long run to targeted operations against terrorist leaders in Pakistan, going beyond the kinetic strikes that we are talking about now into intelligence-driven operations?
Intelligence-driven operations are not in the open domain, and so it'd be very difficult to discuss anything on those lines. That is something which we need to understand. As far as the targets for this time around is concerned, the Prime Minister has been categorical in saying that he's going to go after the terrorists and also their backers. So you find that the terrorist camps could be a very good target. There are other targets which we can, I don't want to discuss them here, but there are other targets that you can actually take up on. And the aim should be to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure that is being supported on the other side. So that is, I think, something we need to look at. But I think we need to leave out this intelligence-based operations and other things from the public domain.
General Dhillon, one final question to you. Pakistan has been using speculative fire, initially in some parts in North Kashmir, now across the line of control near the IB as well. Does it not appear to you that they want to potentially get India to respond over there? And all that India has been doing is responding proportionately and perhaps in a sense keeping them waiting. What to you does that indicate?
Vishnu, the ceasefire violations which are happening on the line of control, it is presently restricted to, as per media reports, only to small arms fire. And this is only a way of Pakistan trying to rake up their own morale and boost their own morale of the forces. This type of firing happens on the line of control every day when the ceasefire is not there. So there's nothing new in it. There's nothing to get worried about it. And this can be handled at the commanding officer level. It will come into play when the strikes go in or the bigger action goes in. That is when it is in India's favor to lit up the line of control. So that is where the whole thing will come into play. And I again believe that this time, with due respect to General Narasimhan, I have always been a student. And this time it is better to hit the factory which is producing terrorists. That is the Pakistan military. Because you will hit one terrorist camp, 10 terrorist camps, 20 terrorist camps, there will be 40 more which would come up tomorrow. Unless you take out the breeding ground. And that is the Pakistan military and Pakistan military jihadi complex.
All right, we'll leave it over there. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. These are very tense times here in the subcontinent. Jonah, you'd be watching these developments from far, far away, but let's see what finally takes place. Thank you very much for being with us.